Hey, what's up, guys? Houston here. Now, here's the question. Should you start an LLC, and where should you set it up? Now, there's something else that you also should consider. Why are you actually even starting an LLC? Is it to get business credit funding? You're looking to start another business? Or you looking to set it up as a chef corporation, okay? And we're going to address all of that. Now, one of the bigger challenges for most people when they start an LLC is, where do I set the LLC up? And the reason is because people say, well, Nevada's great, Delaware, Wyoming, right? Because people are like, whoa, those are states that I don't have to pay taxes in, right? So they're trying to avoid taxes and everything. However, when they set up these LLCs in those states, people don't explain to them that you still have to file taxes in those states. Even though you are not taxed in that state, you still have to file, okay? And this can actually create a penalty for you, all right? Now, another thing about setting up an LLC in a state that you don't actually reside in, okay? So say that you do set the LLC up in Wyoming, but you stay in New York, right? So you're doing it for tax purposes and everything. Well, here's the situation. Wherever the liability is created, that state law supersedes where the actual LLC is actually set up, okay? So you got the LLC in Wyoming, right? But you stay in New York, and there was a liability for your business that created in New York. Those state laws, since that liability happened in that state, those state laws can take precedent over where your business is actually set up, okay? And this is very important because people look at it as trying to avoid taxes. Again, trying to avoid paying state taxes and stuff. And the reality is, I tell people, you're missing out on a lot of opportunity when you're trying to go to these other states that you actually don't reside in, especially as an entrepreneur or a new business owner, especially if you're talking about building business credit, getting access to business funding and stuff. Now, also in these other states, you're still going to have to pay fees as well, because you're going to have a registered agent, okay? So that registered agent is going to charge you a fee every year anyway. All right, so now you have to still file taxes in that state. Even though they don't charge state taxes, you still have to file taxes in it, okay? Plus, you have the registered agent, all right? So those are some things you have to consider. Now, please understand, I'm not a CPA, nor I am a registered IRS agent. The thing about it, I do understand business, all right? So in order to make sure that you position yourself so that you can get the maximum amount of business credit funding, for most people, that's what they're actually doing, trying to position themselves to get business credit funding so they can grow their business, right? So now, here's another question that comes up. Should you start with a Chef Corp LLC, all right? Now, here's something that's interesting about this. When you're starting with a Chef Corp LLC, here's the pros and cons of it. All right. Yes, it's already aged, but here's the challenge of it, is that it may be in another state, okay? It may not have the taxes updated. It may not have updated bank statements, okay? So without taxes updated and updated bank statements, it's going to make it more challenging for you to get funding. So that's the reason that I tell you guys, you have to be very careful. That's the reason, even like we as our corporation, we know how to set up chef corporations, and we won't even suggest it to clients and stuff. We just tell them to use a brand new corporation if you have established credit, okay? Now, here's the challenge that most people do when they set up their LLCs and stuff. They want a loan. And I keep telling people, get away from that loan terminology, okay? Especially when you're looking at nationwide financial institutions. Most nationwide financial institutions, what they want is, if you're going for a loan, they want to see you being in business for 18 up to 24 months, right? But as a new business owner, you don't have that time frame in the mix. Because you don't have that time frame, you're going to get denied, okay? And the reason the banks will deny you for a loan because it's too much red tape for them. So that's another thing that people don't understand. It's just too much paperwork. That's the reason I tell people, if you're trying to go for business funding, you always want to start with business credit cards and business lines of credit, okay? That's where you want to start. Now, here's another thing. There is a tier that happens when talking about business funding, okay? And we're going to address that. But the second thing that we definitely want to talk about is setting up this LLC, the purpose of what type of business, okay? What are you setting this LLC? Many people are like, oh, I'm trying to get into real estate. About 80-90% of the people that we talk to, they want to get into real estate, right? However, we continue to tell you that real estate is a high-risk NAICS code, okay? And so it makes it more challenging. Not saying it's impossible, but it makes it more challenging to get funding, okay? A lot of lenders, even with CDFI lenders and stuff, they will tell you they don't lend to real estate. If you use the term real estate or investment or consulting in your type of business, that makes it more challenging, okay? So that being said, that's the reason I tell you, you want to start with the business credit cards, okay? Because that's your easiest, because it's stated income, okay? Usually no documentation, all right? So that's the reason that you actually want to do this. Now, in terms of going back, talking about that potential business, again, other NAICS codes, again, this is reason like new LLCs or existing LLCs have so big of a challenge trying to get funding because they have the wrong NAICS code, okay? So say that you're into like starting an ATM business. The reason they don't do ATM businesses is because you can create money laundering, right? So that's the reason they think like this. This is how the banks think. No, if we fund you for an ATM, then you can bring in whoever or whatever doing the illegal stuff using those ATMs with those transactions and stuff, and we're attached to it. So that's the reason they make it so challenging for you to start an ATM business, okay? You can buy the machines all day long, but in terms of banks wanting to connect with you and stuff like that, that's a uphill battle. Also in the fees. People don't really understand that a lot of ATM businesses are not profitable. They're not. A lot of people they start with 2 or 3 ATM and they're like, oh, look, I done made it. But the reality is the fees will kill you alone. All right? So that's another thing you have to look at for. Let's talk about restaurants, right? So one of the things about it, I continue to tell people, when you're trying to get business credit funding, do not use that term restaurant. You're not in the restaurant business, okay? Do not use food truck, okay? Because these type of businesses have such a high failure rate. I'm talking about 80-90% failure rate, right? So these financial institutions, they don't want to take that as a loss. So that's the reason you don't want to actually do this here, okay? It's much safer when you're trying to get into the restaurant business, and I'll give you a key to this if you stuck with me this long, is you want to do like food distribution or something like that. I have a neighbor, and had the same thing. He wanted to start a taco shop. And I'm like, bro, why would you go to the bank and tell them that you're selling food like that as a restaurant? Well, nah, you don't do that. You don't do that. You're hurting yourself. So that's the reason that I continue to tell you guys, you have to be very careful. Now, if you don't understand the right NAICS code, the proper NAICS code for your business or something like that, then click the link in the description. Schedule a one-on-one consultation. Trust me, you'd rather have that one-on-one consultation to be able to understand what's the proper NAICS code, the most lendable NAICS code. All right. Now, let's talk about something that everybody seems to be doing these days, and that's credit repair. Credit repair is one of the worst. I'm talking about it's very up there, very highly regulated. And a lot of people are not even aware of this. And they go out and set up an LLC for credit repair, and then they scratching their heads wondering, hey, how come I can't get funding for this? Because it's so heavily regulated. That's the reason why, all right? Now, also, because you're looking at dealing with social security numbers, identity theft, you have all of this. A lot of these people that starting credit repair businesses, I can almost guarantee many of them, they're not even licensed and bonded, right? They're not even licensed and bonded. So in terms of, and again, a lot of them, they more likely, they don't even have an escrow account set up. So it's just so many things that when it comes to like credit repair and stuff, when trying to start an LLC, I would tell you, you do not want to use that term, all right? It's very challenging. Now, there are some high risk institutions out there that will work with a person that has a credit repair business. However, you as a new entrepreneur, a new person setting up your LLC, I would not, and you're trying to get into credit repair, I would not use that term. Stay away from that term, all right? Now, another one is, oh well, sorry about that, guys. Like pornography. It's just one of those things that's just out there. You know, another one is selling ammo, guns and stuff like that. High risk. It's high risk, you know. And people are like, well, I can sell a magazine or I can sell a bullet separate. Anything related to ammo is too regulated. This is the reason why a lot of people, they get these type of LLCs set up and everything, and then they wonder, well, how come I can't get any funding for it? You know? So that's the reason why. Even I tell you something else, and one of my in-house guys, like he's an attorney, and he said, hey man, he said, I should have listened to you. He said, because I told them that I was an attorney and they wouldn't give me funding. Consulting, attorney consulting, that type of stuff is high risk. It's high risk. Gambling, high risk. Money, lending out money and stuff. Those are high risk NAICS codes, okay? And so you have to be very careful, very strategic, because the thing about it, you starting a new LLC, okay? And you know that you're trying to position yourself for funding. So in order for you to position yourself for funding, you need to make sure that you're staying under the radar on all levels, okay? That's very important, all right? Now, I'll tell you something else that a lot of people that's with existing LLCs or starting up LLCs and stuff like that, another thing that they don't, and you hear the term paperwork, having paperwork and stuff like that. You know, a lot of them, what they mean by having paperwork in order to get funding is like having Paystubs, bank statements and stuff like that. Those are the things. Like a lot of people, they're doing this under the table thing. They'll set up the company and yeah, they're making money, cash money and stuff like that, but they're not depositing that under their business and stuff. So you're not actually operating. Yeah, you got this LLC with this EIN number, and I'm gonna tell you about that in a minute with this EIN and stuff like that. But at the same time, because you got a cash-based business and you're not actually pushing that money through your bank statements and stuff, then you can create an audit for yourself for money laundering. That's right. It was a lady, she had a restaurant, cash-based business restaurant, and she kept on like going in every day, depositing money and stuff. Then the banks notified the IRS. The IRS froze her accounts. She couldn't get access to her money, even though she stated she had a legitimate business, even though she presented them, hey, this is a legitimate business. Because again, by her just going directly and depositing all cash into one account instead of her business bank account like that, and not related to the restaurant or whatever, now again, it looks like money laundering, all right? Now, I'll tell you something else. When you're switching over from a sole prop to an LLC, using you need to have a new EIN number. You need to have a new EIN number. If you don't have a new EIN number, again, what can end up happening is triggering an audit. The reason I know is because 15 plus years ago, when I first started and setting up my first company and stuff, and they made a mistake, is because they had me as a corporation, but they ordered me as a matter of fact, they ordered me a LLC EIN number for my corporation, and they created an audit. And so that's the reason I tell people from experience, you have to be very careful with the people you're dealing with when they're talking about, oh, I can set this up for you or whatever. A lot of people don't understand the structure formalities of it, getting the EIN, especially as a sole prop. That's the reason, like, you see so many companies say that they won't deal with a sole prop. Like Capital One Tap, when they said we don't deal with sole props or whatever, that's a problem. That raises a red flag. So that also cuts you out of much easier capital, because like Capital One Tap, they're not looking at the personal credit. They're looking at what the actual deposits and stuff of the bank. All right. So if you're looking to get money under your EIN and you're a sole prop, it makes it more challenging. And also you're still leaving money on the table. So that's the reason I tell people, if you're going to switch over from a sole prop to an LLC, make sure you get a new EIN number. That's very important. Okay. Now, that being said, in terms of going on talking about business funding, okay, one thing, let me reiterate on this so people understand. A lot of people, going back to the Chef Corporation, a lot of people, their attempt is to buy a Chef Corporation, and they're attempting to add trade lines onto that corporation, okay, so that they can qualify for funding. But again, like I said, you're going to have updated taxes, and you're going to have updated bank statements. Most financial institutions, they want you to see at least 2 to 3 months of bank statements, okay? And some of them, they actually would want Paystubs, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But those are the things of why it triggers financial institutions not to give you funding, because they see that all the records are not in place, all right? So that's the reason I tell you guys it's not necessary, all right? Now, that being said, let's talk about this funding. Now, again, like I told you, there's 4 levels of funding, okay? So, from financial institutions, that is, all right? So you have your nationwide banks. So your nationwide banks would be like Wells Fargo, Bank of America, American Express, U.S. Bank, right? So those are your nationwide, so those would be considered like a tier 1. Then your tier 2 type of banks is like Regions Bank, right? You're talking about PNC Bank. You're talking about Truist Bank, okay? Those are a Citizen Bank. Those are your regional type of banks, all right? Then the next thing is like your credit unions, okay? So then with your credit unions, for some of the popular ones that people are always trying to go to get funding would be like Navy Federal to go get business credit funding, all right? Now, again, like I said, one of the things about it, because Navy Federal, just with Navy Federal alone, let me digress on this for a minute. With Navy Federal alone, okay, they have 2-tier system, right? First, you got to get through the door, okay? And so then where Navy Federal, you have your internal score. Now the internal score going from 100 to 450. Now this here internal score is to help you qualify for credit cards and higher limit credit cards, right? So that's the first tier. Then on the business side, you have to put in a separate application, okay, for the business. Then they have to open up the business bank account and stuff like that. And they're going to check to see if you're in a high risk NAICS code, because with Navy Federal, if you're in a high risk NAICS code, they're not going to fund you, nor are they going to open up the business bank account. Navy Federal is very strict like that, okay? So there are other good credit unions around when you're talking about business credit funding and stuff, but the one I wanted to talk about that one because that's like the most popular one that a lot of people think about, all right? Now, The fourth level of funding after the credit unions, the fourth level of funding is like your subprime lenders and stuff like that. Now you have like your alternative lenders and stuff, like I said, with Capital One Tab, you have Divvy, your subprime lenders. Those would be like your Blue Vine, okay, Axis Bank. Now that's the difference between those two, is because they're more subprime and stuff. Like with Blue Vine, a lot of people say, oh, I bank with Blue Vine. Well, let me help you understand why Blue Vine is not the best institution for you, okay? Now with Blue Vine banking, all right, they don't charge you any fees to open up a business bank account, okay? Nor do you have to keep a minimum in it, right? So that's cool. But the thing about it is, because they don't report to the business credit bureaus. Now with their business lines of credit and loans, they report to the business credit bureaus, but not the banking. So that's the reason I continue to tell you guys, you really need to know where to start at, okay? And that being said, that's the reason I tell you, all right? You want to look at Citibank, you want to look at Capital One, you want to look at Chase Bank, because those top three banks there, those top three banks, those are the ones that report most to the business credit bureaus. I'm talking about Experian Business, Equifax Business, Small Business Financial Exchange, and then that information is shared with Dun and Bradstreet, okay? Now here's the key to all of this. One of these is the most important, and that's Small Business Financial Exchange. Because with the Small Business Financial Exchange, they share all of the data, right? And so like if you're trying to get a SBA loan or something like that, they're the ones that's going to look at it. Plus, SBA is going to pull like your credit score and stuff. They used to pull Experian. They may start to pull TransUnion, okay? I'm not aware of them pulling Equifax, but they're going to pull one or two. Usually it's Experian with an SBA loan. So if you start an LLC and you're trying to get an SBA loan, like a SBA startup loan, then you're more likely going to have your Experian pulled and stuff like that, okay? Along with them seeing what else, again, they look at high-risk industries as well. MLM, a lot of people try to get into multi-level marketing and stuff. Then they want to raise money for multi-level marketing and things of that nature. Again, MLM's high-risk NAICS code, okay? That's a very high-risk NAICS code. So if you're in an MLM like, I don't know, like Primerica or any type of MLM or whatever, and you want to start an LLC, you definitely don't want to have it in the multi-level marketing industry, okay? You need to find a more favorable NAICS code, okay? And again, like I said, if you don't know which is the best NAICS code for your business, you need to click the link and schedule a one-on-one consultation for that. Now, in terms of funding, talking about going back to these tiers, like I said, you have your nationwide banks, you have your regional banks, you have your credit unions, and you have your very high risk lenders and stuff like that. Now, in terms of the easiest funding, if you have bad credit, here's the key to it, all right? People figure that, oh, I got a new LLC, can I get some business credit? Now, there's a difference between business credit and business funding. Now, the difference is, like when you're talking about business credit, you more or less talking about like your term credit, your net 30s and stuff, like Home Depot, Lowe's and stuff like that, right? So that means that you don't invested your money into so many net 30s, they start reporting and stuff, and then you can apply for those business credit cards and stuff like that, department store cards, I should say, and gas cards and stuff like that. But one key thing that a lot of new LLCs or entrepreneurs miss when they setting up their LLCs is that the key is having a website, also having a corporate email. That's another thing. That's more important than a Dun and Bradstreet number. And most people are not even aware of that. They figure that, oh, I got this company set up, I got it registered. But again, if you use like a AOL email, a Yahoo, AT&T, any type of generic email like that, when you filling out a business application, you're going to automatically go into high risk. So you should always use a corporate email. All right. Now, if you don't know how to set up your corporate email or website or whatever, again, click the link in the description, schedule a one-on-one consultation. But those are some key factors in terms of just building the foundation of the company up. A lot of people think like, oh, I got all of these in their 30s. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you have a 100 paydex score. That's not going to guarantee you any funding. A lot of lenders, over 90% of the lenders, they're not tripping off of Dun & Bradstreet. They're tripping off what's on your Experian file, what's on your Equifax file. That's what they're tripping off, and on your small business financial exchange file. That's what they're tripping off of. Dun & Bradstreet, that's not something that they really rely on. Now, in terms of when you're getting like business funding and stuff, should you start at tier 1, which is your major banks, or should you start at tier 2, which is your regional banks, or should you start at tier 3 with the credit unions, or should you start with the alternative lenders? Now, I would tell you, when you're starting out, again, your business bank account, this is very important. Make sure that you have one of the nationwide business bank account. Like I said, the top 3 for me would be Chase, Capital One, Citibank. Now you can add American Express because they report to Small Business Financial Exchange. Truist, PNC, those are your regional banks, and they report to Small Business Exchange as well. So having one of those banks, and here's the key to this. Most people don't understand about their business bank rating. Most people never heard of the business bank rating, right? So in terms of understanding your business bank rating, that's about the activity that's going on into the bank account, right? So the more activity, whether you're doing weekly deposits or daily deposits, I always tell people, you want to do that. That's better than a DUNS number, okay? Because you're constantly building that relationship, all right? Now there's the 90-day trigger. Here's the thing about it. What that means is that when you are trying to get a lot of funding from these banks and stuff like that, you want to open up the bank account, make some deposits and stuff, and wait about 90 days and then apply. 91 days. Most people said 91 days. I said 91 days because with banks, it's like every 90 days they're looking at seeing what's going on with your accounts and stuff like that. So if you wait that 90 days and they see there's constant activity and stuff like that, you have a higher chance of getting a better limit on those business credit cards and stuff like that. So that's the reason that you want to do this. Now, another thing in terms of where do you get funded? Say that you just barely have a 580 credit score. Where do you start at when you have a new LLC and you have bad credit with a 580 credit score? Where do you start at? Well, you have a Capital One Spark Classic card. Okay, now remember that Capital One, it reports and pulls from all 3 credit bureaus, and it reports on both the business side and the personal side. Okay, so that's the Capital One Spark Gold card. That's the gold card. All right. Then in terms of moving up the ladder, then you may want to look at like some Corpay, like Corpay 600 credit score, right? But it pulls from Experian FICO 8. All right. Then you have a TIFL. Now TIFL just did a partnership with NAV, right? So with NAV, now you can get 2 trade lines. For those of you that don't know about NAV, NAV actually manages your business credit ratings, right? So in terms of if you want to know what your Experian business credit, Equifax business credit, your Dun & Bradstreet number, and they also will give you a Vantage score on your personal credit as well. But they gather all of that data and they offer it to you, okay? So they also partnered up with TIFL. Now TIFL offers a secured card, right? They offer unsecured and secured card or whatever. But the thing about it, this secured card reports to the business credit bureaus. So with NAV reporting to Experian, Equifax, Dun & Bradstreet, TIFL also is going to report to the business credit bureaus as well. All right. So even like with Corpay, I just mentioned that you can get with a 600 credit score. It's an unsecured card. Now with that unsecured card, it does report to Experian, Equifax, and Dun and Bradstreet also. All right. Now in terms of getting more unsecured funding, you have DreamSpring. Okay, so with DreamSpring, you need at least a 620 credit score, but they offer loans and lines of credit. Now here's the thing about it with DreamSpring. They report on both on the personal and the business side as well. Now 620 credit score, but your DTI has to be below 50%. That's another key thing in terms of why a lot of these lenders are so different. Sorry about that. I guess the ducks are. So you see the ducks coming in over there, and they got the turtles coming over there. So I hopefully that you guys can see that. All right. So let's go back and talk about DreamSpring. Okay. So again, with DreamSpring situation, like I said, they report on the personal side as well as the business side. Okay, so but like I said, 620, you can actually do DreamSpring as a brand new startup, just like with Capital One Spark, just like with Corpay, just like with Tiffle. You can do all of those with a brand new corporation. And like a lot of people are scrambling like, well, I need this net 30 and that net 30. Actually, you're passing up the net 30s and you're actually getting unsecured funding directly. Okay. Now, in terms of, say that you have more of an established credit, like a 680 or higher. Now you're looking at, all right, so which one of the top 3 tiers should I start with? Okay, which ones would probably be my easiest? Okay, besides the national banks, the regional banks, or the credit unions. Okay, some people like starting with credit unions. Credit unions are very flexible. Most people, regional banks are very good. Okay, if you have a established 680, now they're very sensitive on when it comes to inquiries and stuff like that. But regional banks and credit unions is where you want to start. You don't want to go with national. Like I suggest that people, if they have a decent enough credit score, check out American Express, because they'll do a pre-qualify. But in terms of when you're trying to get a lot of money right away, then you definitely probably want to start on your tier 2 or tier 3 level. Okay, so with your tier 2, like I said, with your tier 2, you're talking about Truist that pulls from Equifax, PNC that pulls from Experian, right? Then you have your Regions Bank, you have your Citizens Bank. So those would be your top regional banks that you can take a look at in order to start out with your business credit funding. And then also falling back and looking at your credit unions and things of that nature. Then that would be your tier 2 and then your tier 3, or your tier 3 and tier 2. But in terms of the maximum amount of funding, right away, you probably want to start with the tier 2 or tier 3. Okay, and so I know for some people, they'll jump right in and they'll run over to like Chase Bank. Yes, you may have an account with Chase Bank, and yes, I do tell you to garden a relationship. Again, 90 days. After 91 days, then you apply for credit cards and stuff like that. But what ends up happening, like with Chase, you have to understand, because they have this this high not only high risk rating, but what it is your DTI, your debt to income ratio. Now with most banks, credit unions, like either your tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3, the maximum of that DTI is 55%. That's another thing. So you can have an 800 credit score, but the problem is your debt to income ratio may be too high. So that's the reason they tell you at least open up the bank account and wait about 90 days. While in that 90 days, make sure that you're making weekly or daily deposits. So if you're doing like a handyman business, or you're doing like Uber, Lyft, or DoorDash or something like that, and you're cashing out and stuff. Now here's one technique that I always tell people. when you start your LLC, you want to make sure that you open up a business account with PayPal, okay? Now, the reason is because a lot of people look over PayPal for funding, not realizing that PayPal is a very good resource of funding, especially if you're trying to get it with just your EIN, no docs and stuff like that, and you just have a relationship with them. So in terms of, say, let's use an example, say that you're doing like a DoorDash or something like that, and you know that you're getting paid like every day, or you can cash out every 2 days or whatever. Transfer that money over to your PayPal, and then transferring that money from PayPal over to Chase. Now you're creating this paper trail. Now that PayPal actually see that you're constantly having deposits coming in and stuff like that, then that helps you qualify for more funding without them relying on your personal credit. So that's the reason I tell people you have to make sure that you structure the business properly, then do these other steps so that way you can continue getting funding, okay? This is very important. A lot of people miss out on opportunities to raise that 50 or 100,000 because they don't follow that strategy. Now, another thing that people miss out on is because, again, going back to the paperwork, is that like not wanting to set up their payroll and stuff like that. The reason is because more financial institutions, they're getting to the point where they're going to want to show you to show proof. And yes, with credit cards, it is stated income. But here's the thing about it. There are credit unions out there now, they want to do a Skype call with you. That's right. After you send in your driver's license, pay stubs and stuff, they want to get on the camera with you, talk to you first, face to face, to verify it's you. The reason is because for many of you may not be familiar with CPN numbers. And so, because people always ask, well, can you start a corporation with a CPN number? No, it's illegal. You're using somebody else's social security number, or you may have generated a social security number that hasn't even been issued yet, okay? So some people may pull a social security number created in Guam or whatever, and use that social security number to try to get an EIN number so they can start an LLC and stuff. Every aspect of that, you're doing it illegal, okay? So CPN stands for credit privacy number, all right? And a lot of people in the game, they're like, oh, get funded with a CPN number. I'm telling you guys, because so many banks are merging together and stuff like that, they're compiling all of this data. And people are like, well, you know, they don't have my address or whatever. Bro, let me help you understand something. If your name matches that ID, okay, and it goes into that database on your regular credit profile number, then you create a CPN that doesn't have that address, but it has that name and that locality. Guess what? They're going to match those two up, and they can lock up your file. You have to understand that I've been in this here game over 2 decades. So when I'm telling you guys, don't play with those CPN numbers, you really shouldn't play with those CPN numbers, especially when you're trying to get funding and stuff. You're straight up dipping into fraud, okay? And it can definitely, and I've seen a lot of people that are going to court over it now for fraudulent documentation, all right? You have to be careful with these people that's promising you, oh, you got bad credit, but we can still get you funding and stuff. Trust me, they're going to create a situation for you you may not be able to get out of, all right? So that's the reason I tell you guys, I try to be as transparent as possible with these situations, because many people out here, they're just getting money. That's all they care about, is getting money. So they don't care about who that liability falls on. So that liability may fall back on you. So that's the reason you don't want to do that, all right? Now, going back to the tiers in terms of funding and stuff like that with a new LLC. Well, I didn't know that I can get funding with a new LLC. Yes, you can. That's the reason I tell you, you don't need a shelf corporation. It's not necessary. All right? It's not necessary to have a shelf corporation. It's, you know, a lot of people, they're selling you the dream, you know. Now, do shelf corporations work? Yes, they do work. However, you better make sure who's ever you getting that chef corporation, make sure that the taxes is up to date, make sure the bank statements is up to date. You have to make sure all of this stuff across the board is right when you're trying to get funding. Now, let's talk about something we're talking about, business trade lines, all right? So a lot of people are like, well, you know, I got this company that says that they can put a 10-year-old business trade line on my new LLC. You're going to get yourself in trouble, and you could get burnt by them. Because look at it like this. You just started a new LLC, and someone just put on there that you just paid off a $10,000 5-year trade line. You only been in business. You just started business. So where did this trade line come from? It doesn't make any sense. You're just actually hurting the file, because now what they call it, in business jail with your file or whatever. That's right. When lenders pull your file and they see this and they see that you are a brand new LLC or something like that, and you have a trade lines on your company that's been paid off for 5-10 years and stuff, it doesn't make any sense. And so people think like, oh, they're just looking at the numbers and looking at trade line. No. They're looking at when that account was created, when it was paid off, and they're looking at when was this company established. So there's more to it. I know a lot of people, they have very good information, and I think that sometimes you just get caught up in the hype of trying to get people involved and stuff like that. They over elaborate or over exaggerate the situation because they don't tell you all the details of this. There's more details when it comes to business credit than a lot of people think. Like I said, it's not hard, but there is a script you have to follow. Even some of the top tier people that are in the business credit industry and stuff that talk, oh, that I can get you funding with a brand new LLC and stuff like that, right? And think about it, they're charging you all this money, say, well, if we can get you X amount of dollars, we're going to charge you or whatever. But they're creating all of this non-existent paperwork. So they're creating all this non-existent paperwork under your name. So they're actually creating fraud for you. And it's going to fall back on you because you gave them the authorization to apply for those credit cards and stuff. You gave them the authorization to create all of these documents that are non-existent. So that's the reason that I tell people you have to be careful with people. Like I said, it's a lot of smart people, individuals out here. But at the same time, you have to really pay attention to what they're saying, because they will get you caught up and they ain't there to bail you out. All they're going to say, well, he gave me permission to say that. And just because you gave him permission to say it, that's the reason that they did it. And you're going to be the one that's liable, not them. They just put in the paperwork because you gave them the okay. You'll be the one that's on the hook because you are aware that they're committing fraud. So that's the reason I tell you guys, when it comes to business credit, make sure that who's ever telling you about business credit, make sure that they know what they're talking about, and make sure they understand it, and make sure they're going to tell you everything. Okay? That's the reason, like, we don't fill out any paperwork for you. We suggest financial institutions for you. We'll even go and set up a financial spread of where you need to start at to get funding and stuff. We will do all of that for you. So we'll set the company up. Again, we set the company up. We'll write out what banks to start with, the foundation and all of that stuff. We don't put it in because we don't know what numbers you're starting out with. We don't know your household income. All of that's your business. So that's the reason we don't do it, all right? So for those of you that have more questions about business credit funding, personal credit funding, click the link in the description. Schedule a one-on-one consultation. Thank you.